Today is October 9th. It is 1:26 p.m. I'm about to tell a story about this one time I'm just going to tell you 3 stories today about the KPD and how bad they suck. Alright. So, this one time I went to my friend's house and parked my car down the street because there wasn't enough spaces at his house. So, parked next to this gay guy's house. Oh, sorry. Homosexual. And someone threw a rock through his window and wrote fag on his driveway and ran around the neighborhood telling all the neighbors that he was a faggot. So then I'm inside my friend's house. We're just playing the piano and stuff, even though I don't play the piano. And knock, knock, knock on the door, and we're like, Officer Reese was at the door. He's a redhead. And yeah, and he's like, I got a call from this man down the street, and he says that you guys threw a rock through his window, and we're like, no, we didn't. But Cooper was throwing rocks out the back, and it hit some house on the other side. So before the cop even asked if we were throwing rocks, Cooper said, well, I did hit a house with a rock, so it kind of made things suspicious. So Cooper sucks. And then I was just sitting on the couch. I wasn't in the conversation at all. And Officer Reese was like, well, I'll be calling you guys because I don't believe your guys' story. And then Cooper went outside to talk to him alone, and he was saying stupid things, and the cop asked him what he was on. He wasn't on anything, but it was just horrible. So then, I'm not even in the frickin' story. I don't even know how I'd come up in the story. But the cop calls my cell phone, and I don't know how he got my stupid cell phone number. And he's like, hey, is this Rick Purrier? And I was like, yeah. He's like, hey, this is Officer Reese. I stopped by earlier at Paul's house. Where were you on Friday around 9:30 at night? And I was like, fuck. And I was at a party, but I told my mom I was at Andy's house. So I was at Andy's house. All right, where's Andy live? Downtown Kennewick somewhere. All right, what street? I don't know. What's his address? I don't know. What's his phone number? I don't know. And he's like, all right, well, we got a call from the homosexual down the street saying that you threw a rock through his window and that your car was parked outside of his house. And I was like, yo, I haven't even been to Paul's house in like 3 months. This is the first day I was here, and Friday was like 3 days ago. So I was never here. I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, I think you do know what I'm talking about. And I was like, no, I don't. And he's like, well, you did something on Friday night then. What did you and Paul do? And I was like, nothing. I wasn't even with Paul. And he's like, yeah, you were. And I was like, no, I wasn't. You don't know where I was. I was at Andy's house. And he's like, no, you and Paul were out doing something. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you know what I'm talking about. And I was like, no, I don't. And he's like, yeah, you do. And I was like, no, I don't. You suck so bad. So then he's like, whatever. How about you come to the station tomorrow at 6 a.m.? And I was like, screw that. I'm not waking up to come to the station. And he's like, well, then I'll come to your house. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be at work. And he's like, well, then I'll come to work. And I was like, no, don't come to work. I'll get fired. Got fired anyway last week, but he's like, all right, well, I'm going to come to work then. And I was like, fine, do whatever. Hung up. And then he called my mom and told her this story. He's like, your son on Friday night was causing mischief, throwing rocks through homosexuals' windows and screaming faggot, and wrote faggot all over his driveway and his house and stuff. And I don't know why he'd do that. So then my mom called me, started freaking out on me, and I was like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? And then I was like, Mom, I wasn't even over there. And then my mom was like, well, I don't trust you. You can't do anything anymore. You're grounded for the next 2 weeks. I was like, man, fuck that shit. I didn't do it. I wasn't even there. This guy's lying to you. And then I was like, man, you suck. I called Officer Reese back, and I was like, dude, why did you call my mom and tell her I did all that stuff when I didn't? And he's like, because I want to get the truth out of you. And I was like, so you lied to my mom? Now she doesn't trust me anymore. And he's like, well, that's not my problem. You could have just told me the truth in the first place. And I was like, I told you I didn't know anything, and you're stupid. And I'm not taking that back either, because you're stupid. So then I was getting angry. And what did he said, like, well, you could just tell me what you guys were doing. And I went back to, well, I don't know anything. So then I started, like, fake crying. But it was, like, real. It was, like, pouting. It was pouting. And he's like, why don't you just tell me the truth? And I was like, dude, you are such a faggot. I don't know anything. He said faggot. And he was talking about me throwing something through some faggot's window, you know? And I was like, shit. And he's like, I don't think he noticed. He didn't say anything to me. But he's like, well, I'm going to just come talk to you at work. You'll have to deal with your mom. And I was like, whatever, man. You suck, and all of your cop friends, too. So then, I was like, man, this is bullshit. Paul, tell him what happened. And Paul's like, I don't know. And I was like, well, I got blamed somehow, and I don't know how I got into this. And then, so I called, like, the head guy at the police station, and I was like, one of your officers is telling my mom lies, getting me in trouble, lying to get nothing out of me. And then he's like, well, who is it? And I was like, Officer Reese told my mom this huge lie, and now she doesn't trust me. And he's like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, well, you guys lie too much to try to get stuff out of people that don't know anything. And then I was like, this sucks, whatever, just fix it. And he's like, I can't just fix it, I don't know what the story is. And I was like, you guys suck. You guys suck. You guys suck. That's all I could say, because there's nothing else I could say. So then I was like, well, when you find out, tell my mom I didn't do anything. And they're like, all right. And then, like, 5 minutes later, my mom calls me, and she's like, you need to come home right now. And I was like, no. She's like, yeah. And I was like, no. I'm not coming home. I didn't do anything. This is stupid. So then she hung up, and she had to go look for me, but she didn't know where to look. So then Officer Reese called me back, and he's like, hey, sorry, man, I made a mistake. And I was like, oh, my God, you gotta be fucking kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. He's like, yeah, I guess it was someone else. And I was like, no shit. Man, I told you it wasn't me. And then he just, like, didn't apologize again. He's like, well, I'll call your mom and tell her you didn't do anything. And I was like, sweet. Didn't call my mom. Because I called my mom half an hour later, and I was like, hey, so Officer Reese call you? No, where are you? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not coming home. And I hung up, and I called the guy back, and I was like, hey, your Officer Reese told me that he was going to call my mom and tell her I didn't do anything. And he's like, Officer Reese is off duty for the day. And I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. Again. And that's pretty much the end of the story, because he never called my mom. But she just believed me, because I didn't get in any trouble.